Hello, I'm your resident Gemini, Maria Riegger, and this is Positive Parenting with Astrology. This video is about the full moon in Aquarius happening very early, around 3 or 4 a.m. on August 9th. Very powerful full moon. Let me ask you guys, are you as mentally scattered as I am? Because that is very strong right now. I'm having to do a lot of grounding exercises, right? So like my yoga and my weightlifting and my, going outside and putting your bare feet on the earth to feel grounded, to stabilize, things like that. It's just very frenetic. So there's a lot going on. So this full moon in Aquarius, clearly opposite the sun, and the sun's in Leo. So air feeds the fire, right? So the Aquarius energy is really supporting that Leo energy to both figure out how we shine as individuals and how we can help others shine. If you missed my video on the new moon in Leo, I go over that in detail, so you can go check that out right here. But that Aquarius energy is really giving expression and support to that Leo energy. Now we're going to go right to the chart because I want to point out a few things right here. Share my screen. So we'll see Mars in Libra is opposing that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, Saturn and Neptune being in Aries. And I went over that conjunction in more detail on my video on August transits. So here I'll just touch on the opposition. So Saturn is very impatient. Saturn in Aries even more so. So that conjunction in Aries really supports our going after our goals very aggressively. There may be some confusion or mental fog because Neptune's involved. So there may be a sense of, I want to go after this and get this done, but I'm stymied in some way, or I'm held back in some way, or something is blocking my achievement of these goals. So Mars in Libra supports being open to and kind of figuring out if we can achieve those goals in a more indirect way. So Libra, being air energy, tends to go around obstacles, attack things indirectly. Okay, that's the nature of air, to go around obstacles, right? That's why I always say that air people tend to be a little conflict avoidant because they don't tend to tackle things head on, be a little more passive, right? So, but Mars in Libra supports this idea of trying to be open to figuring out how to get things done, pursue our goals and our dreams, but indirectly. That may involve being open to asking other people for help and support instead of expressing that rugged individualism that Aries and Saturn often call us to do. So think about that. Take a step back, and this is a prime opportune moment to reflect on this because Mercury is still retrograde through the 11th. And even though Mercury stations direct on the 11th, we have the shadow period over a few days. So there may still be this feeling, the sensation of not being able to achieve the thing, right? So this is an opportune moment to reflect on this, reflect on how we can get things done more indirectly, or be open to other opportunities that are presented to us at this time that may maybe indirectly help us achieve this goal. So be open to those things. You don't necessarily have to make decisions right now, but just be open and reflect. Now, we've also got Mars in Libra trining Uranus in Gemini. Uranus is going to be in Gemini for several years, so we need to get used to that. So this is an auspicious transit. It's also, because there are two air signs, going to cause a lot of frenetic mental activity. Okay. A lot of good ideas are going to come up because of this transit. We're going to have a ton of good ideas, and they may all seem good and worthwhile and things that we genuinely want to pursue. However, we cannot do everything all the time, right? Because we are limited by these physical bodies for the moment. So while that transit supports a ton of good ideas coming up, we need to be really careful about what we engage in, because we run the risk then of doing things like halfway and not completing anything. And I cannot tell you how frustrating that is, right? To continuously do these tasks and do these things, these objectives halfway, and be forced to leave them halfway and then do something else. My position is that we are much more fulfilled when we can achieve a task to completion, to fruition, and then do the next task, right? So while a lot of really good ideas are coming up and we may be interested in doing a lot of other things that we may find fulfilling, we really need to be careful about taking action on those things. So this Mars Uranus trine supports us in recording and reflecting on those ideas. Again, Mercury is still retrograde, so I would advise not to take final action on those ideas yet, but record those ideas, reflect on them, maybe bounce them off of somebody else, maybe, talk to a trusted person about them, maybe ask some subject matter experts so you can gather data and gather intel. That's another, that trine also supports that gathering of data, gathering of intel, so that later on you can make final decisions. And then kind of take a wait and see approach. But this is a great time to gather that information, reflect on it, get expertise from other people, okay? So write things down, including your dreams. This energy is also very indecisive. Gemini and Libra are not only conflict avoidant, but tend to be indecisive energies. So again, you may be confronted with many different things, but you may not be willing or able to, for whatever reason, to make a decision on them. Or you may just may not have the certainty to do that. That's okay. It's an indecisive energy. Again, do not feel like you have to make decisions on everything right now. This is a great time to practice mindlessness, okay? In the book, The Upside of Your Dark Side, the authors talk about this. We talk about mindfulness. That's kind of like paying attention to your breath and focusing on and paying attention to things. Mindlessness is more like you do an activity where you don't have to engage your mind extensively, and you kind of see what comes up. For example, just sitting for 10 minutes and just sitting down and kind of clearing the mind, or taking a walk and clearing the mind, not thinking through a problem, just seeing what comes up in the mind. I've talked before about how I'll take a walk, or I'll be, at the gym on the cardio machine, not thinking about anything, and things will just come up, things will pop up. That's what we mean by mindlessness. It's not, doing things on autopilot. It's just taking the time to sit and reflect and not think too deeply or not engage the mind too extensively, and see what comes up. And then take notes on what comes up. What comes up may not be useful for you, but take notes on it and you can decide that later. Now, I mentioned dreams. In my last video on August transits, I also mentioned dreams. Dreams are still very important right now. Neptune's involved, and that Uranus and Gemini, Gemini is ruled naturally by Mercury, and that energy supports these intuitive flashes. And I'm going to have another video next week specifically on that, Mercury and intuition. So that Uranus and Gemini supports these rapid flashes of intuition, rapid downloads. And of course, like we said, Neptune's involved. Neptune's is associated with dreams. So pay attention to your dreams. Write your dreams down. Remember, it was James Watson's dream that prompted him to discover that double helix strand, which represented DNA. It was a breakthrough discovery, and he was able to discover it because he was inspired by a dream he had. So dreams sometimes can give us that inspiration, those breakthroughs. Dreams are also, as I've talked about in other videos, they can also be the mind's way of processing traumatic events. All right. So dreams are very important. Not every dream may be, 100% meaningful, but I encourage you to reflect on your dreams, write them down, and you may be surprised what comes up. So these transits support a ton of mental activity. You can probably tell. It's all over the place. So when things are very scattered like this, I recommend people to go back to basics, to really cut through the mental chatter and go back to basics. I'm going to give a brief story to illustrate this. So recently I was presented with a legal question. As you all know, that's my day job as a corporate attorney. I was presented with a legal question, and there's all kinds of chatter all over the place about this issue. And I reviewed some case decisions, just the outcomes of the cases, and I thought, this doesn't make sense. Like, what is going on here? So I went back to kind of the original court decision on this matter, and I reviewed it. And when I reviewed it, just the decision, just the legal language in the decision and the court's rationale, everything became very clear. All I had to do was review that one decision, and things were very clear. it was so hard to cut through the chatter of everybody, everybody else in the news and social media and all these things. But when I went back to basics, to the actual decision, it was very clear. And I didn't need to worry about the rest of the stuff. So that's what I'm encouraging you guys to do, is not to take other people's words for things all the time, and not to get overwhelmed by, and not try to concentrate on all this information, because it's gonna, well, number one, it's impossible to concentrate on all the information all the time. But number two, a lot of it is frankly not useful and detracts you from what the core of the issue, right? So I encourage you to do that, to kind of go back to basics, even if other people are telling you, well, we've done that and it was this, here's the answer. That may not be accurate, because they may be taking in all this chatter too. So that's a really good reminder to do that. And I think when we have transits like this, where there's so much air activity and there's so much mental activity and this chatter, and we're mentally overwhelmed and overstimulated, I think those transits serve as a reminder to do just that, to really go back to basics and focus on one thing at a time, and focus on the basics, and try to ignore, to the best of our ability, this kind of mental chatter, because a lot of it's not correct. Good reminder to do that. And I want to point out, there's a wonderful kite formation right here. You can see that. See this trine, Mars trining Pluto, Pluto sextiling that Neptune Saturn conjunction, that sextiling Uranus, and Uranus right there, trining Mars, which we already talked about. So that kite formation, it's formed from trines and sextiles, which are considered positive aspects and positive transits. That is very supportive of our goals right now. But we have to cut through a lot of that chatter, like I was talking about, to kind of get to our goals. And because Mercury is still in retrograde, we may feel frustrated. But my point is, I think we should be very optimistic, because the energies are very supportive. We also may feel in some sense, at some kind of crossroads about the direction our lives are taking. We may feel a pull toward various directions. We talked about this a little bit earlier. We may get a lot of good ideas, right? May feel this pull in all these different directions, both professionally, maybe personally, and clearly, like, it's hard to make decisions on that. So it's a good time to ask yourself what you want, and if you were to obtain the thing you want, would it actually support your well-being? Would it actually make you happy? Would you actually enjoy having it? A lot of the time we want things, but then when we get them, we don't really enjoy them. It's almost like we covet the thing just to have it. For whatever reason, we think we may like it, but we don't actually like it, or our well-being is actually decreased by having it or achieving it. So it's a good time to reflect on that question. These things that I want, am I really going to enjoy having this? I want this job, but would I really enjoy that job? Day in, day out, would I enjoy that job? How would it affect me personally? How would it affect my relationships? How would it affect my family? My relationships with my kids, right? One thing I'm telling parents of young kids right now, who I know personally, is I tell them, look, when your kids are teenagers, I recommend that at least one of you has a job with some flexibility, where you can be available for your teen, both physically and emotionally available, because teens need a lot of support. You don't necessarily think that, because physically they're more independent, but they need a lot of support as they make that transition to adulthood. So it's important to recognize that and think about, whether these professional goals would also support your goals with your family. It's tough to balance, I know, but we need to be asking ourselves these questions and reflecting. Now we've also got Mercury. Here we go. Mercury in Leo is opposite Pluto in Aquarius. That's very interesting, right? This, to me, another opposition. So the elements are air and fire are, again, compatible. Again, air feeds the fire, right? But this transit, to me, indicates that very much about how I can help others shine. Because Pluto being in Aquarius, Aquarius is an energy associated with society and the collective. So this opposition supports this messaging about me, what I want, and how can I help others in the collective? How can I help others shine in the collective? How can I be of support? And it's also about how I can integrate my healing, how I have healed, what I have learned, and how I can integrate that, and how can I articulate my internal experience of that, and how can I use it to help myself and help others as it has helped me. So very supportive, optimistic transit, in my opinion. Now, I want to close with this very hopeful transit, in my opinion. We have, where are we? Oh, yeah. So Venus in Cancer conjunct Jupiter in Cancer. And you'll see they're actually squaring Mars. That's interesting. So, of course, this is a transit, this conjunction that's going to cause big feelings. You can expect people to crave more love and affection, and also to have a greater need for feeling seen. So really pay attention to your kids and how they are asking for connection with you, because I expect that our kids are going to have a greater need for connecting with us, especially older kids, because older kids and teenagers ask for connection in very indirect ways. And if the parents are not paying attention, a lot of the times they won't necessarily realize the kids are asking for connection. So pay attention to your kids and how they're asking for connection with you, and whether they may be asking to spend more time with you. You could even sit your kids down and ask them, "Hey, I'd like to know if, how I'm doing, how you think I'm doing as a parent, and if I'm doing enough for you, and how you would like me to show you affection. Are there any ways you think or would like for me to change?" That may be a very vulnerable question to ask your kids, but I think you may be very surprised if you actually ask your kids that question and then sit and just listen to them, let them speak with no judgment. You may be very surprised in a good way. So that's something that you can think about doing. This is a great transit, this Venus in Cancer conjunct Jupiter in Cancer. This is a great transit to do that. It really supports that connecting with our kids. But it's definitely going to mean that there is a greater need to be seen for who we truly are. It's a transit that supports the growth of relationships and the deepening of relationships. And I'd like to end this video on another positive note that hopefully gives you all a little bit of optimism for society in general. So recently I have dogs, because I love dogs, always had dogs in the house. We recently fostered a dog who was at a shelter locally who needed a foster, and she got adopted. So very happy for her, but I miss her because she was a real sweet dog. My point is, so because of the return to the office mandates, unfortunately, there has been a large uptick in the number of dogs and cats that have been abandoned or surrendered to the shelters. Very sad, but that's the practical consequence of some of these things. So a lot of the rescues are working overtime to solicit donations to be able to maintain these pets in shelters and also to find homes for them. And for example, there's a ton of abandoned animals in the South that are flown up to my area. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, where they're more likely to be adopted. So you have flights full of these crates of these dogs and cats to be brought up here to be adopted. And I was thinking about this a lot recently, that I think in a very positive way, my position is that it's so great that we have come to a point in society where we can direct effort and attention and care on this level to our pets. Some of us are still in survival mode, clearly, and that's something that needs to be addressed. But many of us are to the point where we're not living in survival mode and we can actually direct care and effort toward our pets. And that is a great thing, that we can actually direct effort toward placing these dogs and cats for adoption instead of just leaving them abandoned. That is a very positive development for sure. And that made me feel more optimistic about where we're going generally in society. So I want to leave on that optimistic, positive note. I hope you've enjoyed this video about this Aquarius full moon. If you have any questions, please leave them below and we will be back very soon. Thank you.